I wanted to start talking about inspirations and the spark, where the show begins, you know, on the blank page or as you are just starting to get something on its feet. I'm curious if you could talk about your experiences in, you know, bringing a concept to life. Can you talk about the origins of your various shows? Justin, can you talk about Superstore?
Yeah, I think for me, I think depending on the show, it can always the germ can always be different. But for Superstore, it was definitely the world. It was realizing that I hadn't seen almost any shows about retail really on TV. And you know, when you're trying to develop something, you're always trying to think what is some angle on something. And I tend to like workplace shows, and that was just a workplace that I really hadn't seen. And then I started thinking about blue-collar jobs in general, and how there used to be this image of it was like factory lines and stuff, but that's not as prevalent anymore, and that this just seemed like a world that would allow me to have lots of really fun, colorful characters, but also tell stories we're not used to and characters we don't see as much on television.
A world where lots of people could naturally come in and out very organically to your character.
I think, you know, I loved, you know, I think Community is a good example of a show that, like, you just got to know more and more the world, or Parks and Rec. Like, I love shows like that where the world just keeps expanding and expanding. And a store like this, between the customers and the fact that even the employees have so much turnover, it just gave us so many opportunities to, and still gives us so many opportunities to bring in new characters, to try people out, and then when we like what someone brings in, we can keep writing to that. Yeah.
Sarah, tell us about I Love Dick. How did that come to fruition?
It came from a book, and it came from this, really not about a world. It came from the voice of a character in the book I Love Dick. And I read the book and thought, the book is a bunch of letters, so it really doesn't resemble a television show at all. In fact, it was not something that I immediately said, oh, this would make great television. But I knew that there was something about this character and her drive and her obsession that moved me in ways that I hadn't been moved in so long, and like really made me angry, and really made me like excited, turned on, like repulsed. And if one character could do that, I thought, I want to bring her out of this book and onto a screen. And so from there, that's really how it took off. And the idea that what she was doing was just so bombastically kind of letting her sexuality and her desire just run out. I thought that would be something that we might want to see. So I think it was this kind of, it really was an emotional, like both admiration and repulsion that brought me to want to think about how to possibly maybe someday make this into a television show.
That's a spark of information. Jonathan, Baskets is such a distinct world and group of characters. Can you talk about...
Yeah, I think it started with Zach and I just going, okay, how can we showcase Zach? And building a clown character, you know, he is a clown, and a clown that wants to be taken seriously. Okay, that's his thing, and how can we do that? And he said, I have a friend, she doesn't want to be on the show. Martha Kelly came in, she said, I don't want to be on the show. He said, can you work with someone like that? I said, I love her, let's try it. So it really came from actors and trying to put people together into a pot and stir it around and see what you get. Let's bring in Louis Anderson as the mother. Okay, these elements don't really make sense together. And then we then we start writing and figuring out what is this show. We just take because I come from I'm directing the show too, so it's like the spark is like it's a film that we're experimenting with and rewriting, and so this whole spark of like this guy whose mother, paid for clown college, and this kind of real, it's very like real, natural world that's got this very slapstick thing. It was like a workshop, I think, that got us to this point, and so that sparked it. And having Louis C.K. there as like a sort of our wise guy on the hill, saying like, giving us some direction. But it was a messy process, I would say. It was a mess.
Did you envision it as the twins?
Zach
playing twin characters?
Yeah, Zach's been doing twins. He does Seth Galifianakis. Like, he's been doing it for years. So there were some built-in things to kind of figure out and try, and these big, like, kind of jokes built into it. And then it was kind of backwards engineering this world. And then by episode 4, you've got, it takes some time to, like, make it all make sense so it's not insane.
Gotcha. Joshua?
Well, Greg Shapiro, a producer I'd worked with before, had come up to me. We used to have these breakfasts, and he had suggested this idea of maybe there's a retired president, who was a president 20 years ago. And it was one of those moments as a writer where I felt there was absolutely inherently nothing interesting about it, because there's like zero interesting about a retired president. If anything, it's the opposite. They're marked and they're defined by how they just sort of fade away. And So I just sort of wrestled with it for about a year and a half, and I kept coming back to it. And then I woke up one morning, and it was very distinct because I woke up with Nick Nolte in my brain. And I thought, well, if it was Nick Nolte who was smoking and drinking and sort of a bit of a train wreck, that's sort of an interesting ex-president. And then I sort of took it to its then I did my twist on it, which was figuring out the idea of a man who wakes up 20 years later and realizes that everything he did screwed up the country for the rest of the world, for history, and how can he go on a journey to right his wrongs, and he gets this assistant who was this sort of like, if it was as if he was Reagan, and this kid was brought up on the dogma of this ex-president, and he meets the president at the very moment that the president is tearing down his legacy. And so it really was a case of a story where the kernel of the idea, I guess it never really is what it is. It's the kernel of the idea sort of sits there until you can take it to some place that's its natural conclusion or its most ridiculous conclusion. And then also, as it is with, I think, all these shows, when the actor is cast, then the real sort of magic embodying these characters happens. And so there sort of was a reluctance at first, and then just sort of it took off from there.
So you wrote it for Nick Nolte. You wrote it with him on your wish list.
I really did, and I kind of felt, well, it wasn't going to be Nick, it could be somebody else, but on some level, it really was a case of the actor really inspiring the role. I don't know if that happens for a lot of writers, but for me it does help, thinking specifically, and then very often it's cast differently and you can't imagine it being anybody else. But in this particular case, it ended up being the actor who was imagined from the beginning.
Prentice, can you talk about how you came to partner with Issa Rae?
Yeah, I mean, I think, different than a lot of people on the panel, my show, I didn't create the show. I was on a show called Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and I read Issa Rae's script for Insecure, and I was like, because like when you're trying to write, they go like, oh, never write that, right? Like, don't, that's too, Insecure will never happen as a thing. It just would be a bad idea. And then you read it and you go, this is everything I've been feeling, everything I've been thinking, and especially as being a person of color in a writer's room when I worked on like a various amount of shows that were all awesome, but I was the only person in the writer's room who looked like me. And when I read Issa's script, and she was the only person who looks like her at her work, and experiencing those things and those feelings, and this feeling of, I feel like Issa's character on a traditional sitcom would be like the sixth lead, and she'd just be there with like sassy comments and like tell the boss why the boss is crazy and like do stuff like that. But here that character was like front and center, and you're sort of watching this sort of like intricate, flawed character. And I feel like people of color usually never get to be flawed. We sometimes always have to be the perfect embodiment of everything. And here this character was making bad life decisions and making kind of weird choices. And I felt like, especially in the world we live in now, where like that, you know, you kind of get painted as like one brush. And to see a person of color having all these dimensions and being, having all these angles about her that were interesting and different and off. And I just felt like that just spoke to me in a way that I felt like I have to help this, right? I'd been working for 10 years, and if I hadn't learned all these things to like help shepherd another young writer who was like me, you know, 11 years ago, then what the fuck is it all for, you know? And so I remember I had my agent, I told my agent, I was like, give me a meeting with this woman, and I wrote her a letter about all the things why I thought I'd be a good showrunner with her. And I remember I typed it, and come to find out, we grew up in the same neighborhood. We grew up a block over from each other. I'm years older than her, but we have a lot of similar experiences, and we met, and then like within like 15 minutes, I think we were like, yeah, we should just like do this. And then like, here we are 2 years later.
So you chased that script. It wasn't something that came your way as a
totally. I totally chased it. And I think that was another thing of like being humble enough to recognize this is special, you know, and not be like, I'm doing blankety blank now. You know what I mean? Like being like, this is awesome. And I want to help make it even more awesome. And this isn't about, you know, you just don't get those opportunities every day to be a part of shows that are special. I think we've all worked long enough to know like, oh, you do this job. Like you do jobs in the beginning because you're just keeping your head down trying to get credits, right? You're just like, I'm going to just take this gig. I'm going to take this gig. And if you're blessed, then you work on great shows too. But you can't always predict that, right? You're just trying to get jobs. And so at a certain point, you also want to get to a point where you're like, I have something to say. I want to say the things I want to say. I want to start to dictate the terms of the things I want to do. And so I had kind of reached that point. And it was another thing where I was like needing something to speak to me, and it just spoke to me. And so I just was like, I got to go after something that speaks to me.
Mm-hmm. Wait, I can see why you were a persuasive. It was a persuasive. Now, Mike, you woke up one day and Norman Lear was on the phone wanting to work with you?
Yeah.
Pretty much how it went down?
That's pretty much, well, we wrote it for Nick Nolte, but he passed. And,
Thank you, Nick.
son of a bitch, didn't want to play a Latina single mom. I don't know why. Yeah, Norman was the whole inspiration. And I have done a couple shows before that where Men of a Certain Age, which was a dramedy, and a couple of other single camera shows where we were allowed to be somewhat emotional. And I grew addicted to that to the point where I don't want to do shows now where, you know, it's just pure laughs are bullshit, is what I'm trying to say. And tears are where it's at.
And you'd had a long and successful run on Everybody Loves Raymond.
Sure, yes.
Yes,
I came from multi-camera, hadn't done it for 10 years, and now, you know, Norman, just the idea that you could do, that have Norman as the goal. You're never going to get there, but, you know, that's the style of show that you're allowed to do. And people let you then, they respect what you're trying to do. Having long scenes, having you know, some real you know, super emotional stuff happening. They don't question it because they know, you know, we have him to go, no, he did it, so we're trying to do that, which was very attractive to me. And then meeting Gloria Calderon-Kellett, who really should be here because she's been the Hollywood Reporter. I don't want to start some shit, but we created the show together. I have teenagers. I have never in all my, I'm super old, have never been able to do a show where my family was the same age as the characters. Because Raymond, my kids were much younger than those kids. And so it was really interesting. And my daughter is gay and my son is a fashionista, and I had a lot to say. I had a lot to talk about. I had now lived an experience with these children, and you know, I can prove how bad a parent I am sometimes. And then Gloria had this Cuban family, and you know, really it was a total arranged marriage. We met in Norman's office and sat across from each other, just like, all right, I guess this is a thing now. And then we went and we had a meeting with Norman, which was great. And then we went out and we sat in a cafe for like 3 hours and just talked and talked and talked. And she talked about her parents and who basically lived with her. And her, you know, this character, like basically Rita Moreno plays her mom, essentially, and Justina plays a version of what Gloria would be if she were single, and it really just flowed so naturally, and we really just, I don't like that she's not here. I don't like it.
We need a Geneva Convention.
Yeah.
For these Emmy things. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. She's my co-developer, co-showrunner, and I am codependent, is the word.
I mean, you had so much to work with. You had a great show, and then you add on the Rita Moreno, and she just virtually steals it.
This kid came out of nowhere.
That's wonderful. So we've talked about the germ, the spark. Can you talk about a show, obviously, with all the different elements? You have to catch lightning in a bottle with your casting, with your timing, with the zeitgeist. Can you talk about over the first season or over the first couple of seasons how things change, maybe in ways that you didn't expect, how characters took on a life of their own, how plot twists? Are there any kind of examples of how the thing that you created almost takes on a life of its own and changes in ways that you don't expect?
Someone else go first this time. I'm trying to think. How it changes? Yeah, I mean, it inevitably changes. You write roles and you cast people and they play those roles in the pilot, and they're playing something that you weren't writing for them. So just from episode 2, it's such a vast difference. In those first 6 episodes, you're figuring out who the characters are, and you're trying things. I'm trying to think on my show in particular. I mean, how the characters changed. I don't know. I mean, for us, a lot of it was early on trying to the character of Amy, America Ferrera's character. I think in the pilot was very reactive and very just like resigned to her place in life and not especially happy. And I think it was interesting for her function in the pilot, but that's not a character that I think you want to stick with over time. So I think a lot of it was finding what are the things that bring her joy, where are the times when she when she lets down her guard a little, what are her moments of vulnerability, and just making it her a more fun character. And a lot of that just comes from the relationships too, seeing who's friends with who doesn't like who rubs each other the wrong way sometimes, and then bonds in a weird way, in a different way. So we had an episode where she and Dina go off on this manhunt for Cheyenne's boyfriend Beau, and the two of them actually bond. And those episodes are really fun when you get that. You have two characters who've never really talked, letting their guard down, and seeing that Dina kind of wants to get married, and that she is a vegan, and that's the other thing I always talk about, that you find the inconsistencies. I think you start off with a character and you want to be consistent because you want to be true to who they are. But then over time, just like real people, there's things that don't seem like that person should do that thing. And those are the things that I think add richness to the character.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if some of that is a process of you start and you start with a writer, you start with sort of a singular vision, or if you have a co-writer, but then as a series goes on, you bring more people into the room, you bring ideas, you bounce off of other writers in the sort of evolutionary process of a show.
Yeah, and I think also, I'll start with the characters and I'll write down a bunch of adjectives that come to mind that describe them. But over time, you want, if you're describing a character, to have to say, you just kind of have to see it. You want it to go beyond just a bunch of descriptors.
I mean, Jonathan, one of the characters that really surprised me was Louis Anderson's character in Baskets. He played it, which could be high camp. He played it with so much emotion and so much heart. You really just, you bought him as a mom, and as the story went on. Was that something? Did that surprise you that he just commanded that so well and with such heart?
Just casting of him was maybe one of the dumbest decisions, but turned into one of the best decisions because we really had no idea.
He's got an Emmy to show for it.
Yeah, it's just what is this going to be? And the performance was just so shocking. And to write for this, because Louis has such this real mother, it's so real, and he's just been a student of humanity and listening, and he's such a big fan of his own mother, and we really were like, whoa, this is this really cool thing that was not expected at all, to kind of, in a way, steal the show. And definitely in the second season, we said, okay, this is like a two-hander show, and that it's Zach and Louis, And that was so unexpected, but you just go for it because you're like, this is so fun and magical. And so I think, yeah, a lot of the times you just see what's happening in front of you and you're like, you can't not change things a little bit and think of that character, which was a smaller character that can grow. And I think I was watching other people's things that they were doing on TV and thinking, I think you can just do that. I think you could just change whatever you want to change, because I think thinking about coming here, the audiences have brought TV to this place in a lot of ways. They're really savvy, and they want me as a audience member. I'm like, yeah, go for it. Do whatever you want to do for that time slot. If I like who's making it, who's in it, do whatever you want. Like, I don't need the repeatability. It can be one character for the whole time. I like the experimentation that's going on right now in this medium. It's very cool.
I mean, as Prentice said, the boundaries are so,
Yeah.
and it feels like there's so much, every one of the shows are very defined by, very specific characters, very specific roles. There's nothing, it's almost like the, what they used to call the 8:30 show, the more sort of generic shows. There's just, in a world of 450 shows, that kind of show can't survive, but yet, the story of an Issa Rae or the story of, this wildly distinct character out of Bakersfield, California is something that, people well outside of Bakersfield, California can relate to Chip and to Dale and to the mother. Sarah, can you talk about, you were working from a book. Did you, I would imagine at some point your story really took off from what was in the text. And
I mean, almost immediately. The book is not set the same place. There's a bunch of characters in the show that never appear in the book. It's very inspired by the book. It's the triangle that is the center of Isle of Dick is this relationship. And there's actually one key moment in the relationship that I think sparked the show that is probably the thing that we adapted, which is a husband and wife go to dinner with another man. The woman, the wife, decides, she just has this lightning bolt moment of obsession which I think many, many people can relate to. Of, oh my God, what if I go to dinner with somebody and I fall in love with them, or I fall in obsession with them, and and I stand on the edge of maybe destroying my marriage. And she wrestles with that all night, only to tell her husband what has happened and have him say, "Great, that's really turning me on. I've never loved you. I've never wanted you more. We can really work with this. Can I read that letter that you're about to write to the guy that you want to with?" Catholic, sorry. So it just so it was that, and from that, so that basically was the moment of adaptation. Like, who are these people, and what is going to happen to them, which we kind of knew from the book. But I think to your question about what happened unexpectedly, we deviated very fully in many, many ways. And yet I think the way in which we shot and then edited, and the directors that we brought in and the writers that we brought in, and obviously Catherine Hahn, who is, if you're not letting her improvise, then you're an idiot. You're
wasting a good resource.
Yeah. Who do you think you are as a writer if you're not going to let Catherine Hahn just be like, hey, here's a script. But you go for it. Suggestions. And so we have a very loose way. And in fact, Andrea Arnold, who directed 5 of the episodes, she does this thing where you don't even say, this is horrible to say at a writer's panel, you don't even say the words for the first take. You just do a complete silent take of the scene and kind of allow things to emerge. And there's always a writer on set, so they may but it really allows you to kind of open up to what is what's working, because what's in front of you. And then we had a whole post experience and extravaganza, and from that came this whole idea to put feminist filmmakers' work in, and like, who is Amazon to think, yeah, why don't you just drop in some Chantal Ackerman? That's gonna make ratings skyrocket. But they did, and so that whole thing came, the kind of formalistic element of it came from the just receiving the show. And so we really, I say we because Soloway and I have this kind of way of saying, like, we have to stay open, we have to stay honest, and we can't just you can't push for comedy.
Is that a process that in and of itself takes a certain energy, like to be able to go with where the material is pointing you or where the performances are pointing you?
Yeah, we drink a lot of power smoothies in the room. No, it just takes trust.
Well, I mean, I think to Jonathan's point, like it's amazing what is possible, and we here we have a really interesting range of shows that show the breadth of television. Everybody all day long. We had a day-long conference here. There was not a panel that didn't talk about the peak TV phenomenon, the fact that there is 450 shows. One thing I've noticed with a lot of comedies and a range of genres within comedy is that there very much seems to be an emphasis on building plot throughout a season. Less so on the just a close-ended situation, and much more building toward a particular plot. I think, all of the shows in varying degrees had, kind of ended the seasons on a bit of a cliffhanger. You threw in a hurricane to destroy your, a tornado, not a hurricane, not a hurricane in St. Louis, a tornado to basically tear down the Superstore. But do you think, I know some of you are first-time showrunners, Mike, I know you've got a lot of, more years on that, but is there any kind of pressure to do that because there is so much competition and you really need to have a compelling engine to bring people back each week?
Well, I would just say, first of all, peak TV means that we all love each other's shows and have not seen them. Right? We can agree on that as a panel. Fantastic. Just amazing. Let's just... Too many.
It's tough.
But I would just say for our show, it's super traditional. Obviously, it's the oldest format, and it's I Love Lucy format. But it was great to, first of all, just do 13, which gives you, time to do an arc and not have to sort of extend it through the 22, 24. You also don't get into the death march of the sitcom where episode 17 is going to suck. I mean, it just takes so much out of you to get through the whole year. So the plot, the ability to aim for a certain endpoint and then make it, for us, very slightly serialized. But our goal was we have a studio audience, and they haven't seen the shows around it, so they need to get the story and the jokes. We can't have callbacks to previous episodes. Occasionally we can throw in a little clip of a previously on, but it's still weird because they haven't really seen the episode. So it was the challenge of advancing a story at the same time that we're really doing, a self-contained enough story. And it was great. It worked out great for us, and I think it gave us that extra. By the time we got to the end, it was, people were really invested.
I think too, like in the landscape we have now, like, back when I was coming up, like a lot of us, there were 3 channels. So you had 20 episodes to super invest, because it's all about investing in characters you fall in love with, right? So back then, you had, CBS, NBC, ABC, and you'd watch 24 episodes of Family Ties or whatever it was, and you fell in love with these characters. But now, because there are so many television shows, you don't have the time to fall in love, right? So it's like, how do I invest in a character that I don't see all the time, that I'm only going to see for 10 episodes? So you do have to sort of build. How do you care about somebody is just in life is you go on a journey with them, right? You experience things that they experience, and you either attach yourself to that emotion or you don't, or you fall in love with this character because they make a decision or they make a bad decision or whatever. So you just have less time. So in a lot of ways, in the same way that drama shows sort of invest in an arc and a thing like that, I think comedies are going in that way just because you aren't doing as many, and you have to make people start to care about people kind of out the gate. And I think by doing a narrative story that doesn't feel closed-ended at the end of each week helps to do that. And then we've never necessarily felt pressure to do that, but I think in the world that we tell stories now, that you can put Louis Anderson in a dress and you can do these interesting stories and do these narratives, you sort of want to do those things, you know?
I mean, I also think that someone mentioned emotion and truth, and I think that's interesting in a half-hour world, in a setting. And I think it's a testament to the networks and the studios that are seeing that. I mean, one might have thought at time that too much emotion was considered to infect comedy. Like, you know, if you're going to bring them down, you got to bring them back up. And so how can you have, you know, when I watch your show and I watch some of these shows, they're very heartfelt, you know, and I think that there's a real commonality here where in this new landscape, you're able to be funny and wry and mean something and have emotion. You know, in my show, the first season was more plot-driven only in the sense that it was, and I think there's truth about most shows the first year. It's about what the concept is on some level. What are you selling? He wakes up 20 years later and realizes he messed up the world and has to right his wrongs. And year 2 is about, well, why did he become the person that was so born so open to the world only to grow up to mess it up, you know? And I think this is where things get interesting, when you can explore relationships. And we just did an episode where I brought Jacqueline Bisset back as a first wife, like the Jane Wyman character with Nick Nolte. And they had this amazing chemistry, and it was really hard. It was funny and really surprisingly emotional. And the ability to allow them to have this real experience within the context of a half-hour comedy, where you used to do that used to be the hour thing, you know, the half hour was 4 jokes a page, you know, has been very freeing for, I think, writers. And one of the things in a writer's room that may be a little bit of a struggle, because sometimes you want to take those writers who come from comedy and let them understand that we don't have to always hang the lantern, or we can let them actually just have this moment and experience it, knowing that we'll get them back. You know, the funny will come. So that's a lot of what it is.
I do have one thought, though, that what we're doing now is kind of came out of this last 8 years before something else happened, where everyone was happy. They were like, you know what, I could go dark with my comedy. I could like get into it, but we might be entering into a new era where people are like, I want my candy back, I want to zone out, I want to be happy, because the world got really scary, and so my tolerance for the melodrama is maybe like a little bit less. So it'd be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of years. Because I know, like, I do Portlandia, and a lot of people say tragic moments in their life, like their mom's in the hospital or something, like, I tune it on and it makes me happy for a little bit of time. And there's some moments in your life where you're just like, I need something just funny, that's super funny, that just for that time, sometimes I'm like, that's what it's too much of a pat yourself on the back, but like, that's the noble thing that you can do, is like make someone forget about their life for 22 minutes. And it's awesome.
Preston Sturgis, it's like, you know, it's
right.
Absolutely. Sarah, you were gonna.
No, I was just say forget about their Twitter. Just forget about checking the tweets just for like 27 minutes. At any given day, it would be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think also that part of, at least me, that like would be like, I just want to put on something mindless. I'll just put on a sitcom years ago. And now it's like, if I want something mindless, I'd put on like reality television. So like now I think we just went to the next place.
Can I just say, the other thing about peak TV though too is that what you were talking about in terms of like doing shows that show us who we are, and because it should give us all ulcers to think there are 435 shows or something, but it's also like, if you're doing 435 shows, if they're out there and there's not a show that's been that you see yourself or you see your people represented in, then what is peak TV? And I think for us it was just like, we're gonna have this room, we're gonna have only women, and we're just gonna give them the kind of moment to say, hey, what's up? This is a show, obviously we're gonna plot it out, but what is going on with you? And I feel like that's the exchange that people are looking for. Where am I in television? And to ask those questions and to be able to be in this moment that you can express it is, you know, it seems unusual.
Oh, Absolutely. The specificity is speaking to, and it's not just speaking to, a very distinct subset, but people find themselves, I loved the relationships in Insecure and the conversations because they were things that, they were things that people in the working world deal with, and it sounds like what you responded to. And when you
for us it was having it's so funny, like I would have certain conversations in certain writers' rooms, and the conversations we have on Insecure are very different in those writers' rooms. Obviously, one, we're populated by a lot of women in our room, and populated by a lot of African American people in our room, and we just wanted to put the conversations that we were having in closed doors or when it's just us on the screen. And it felt like, look, if we can't do that shit now, you know what I mean? Like, here's the platform to talk about that stuff, and, Black views about therapy and African American views about homosexuality and all those things that are sort of layered in between all those things. And just having real conversations that we were having politically, privately, publicly, or conversations we had to bite our tongues on before, or sort of I don't want to seem super aggressive, or I don't want to seem like I'm being the angry Black person or whatever. It's like, it was sort of freeing to be like, let's just talk about all the things we're talking about. And we threw it, our goal, so like sometimes we would sort of hedge and be like, maybe we should, and we were like, there's no guarantee we're gonna get a season 2. So let's just throw all that shit in the pot right now.
Go big.
And just go all in.
And it's 2017. It's about time. It's absolutely about time. Let's talk wonky showrunner stuff. Let's talk about schedules. Hank Azaria was here, and he stopped this room cold earlier today, and he said that he did IFC's Brockmire, which is very funny and has a lot of the elements that we're talking about. A lot of really sort of surprise, a very jokey character, a baseball announcer, but with a lot of heart. I thanks greatly to the talents of Hank and also Amanda Peet.
I love it.
I know you've seen every episode twice, but he stopped the room cold. They did 8 half hours in 22 days. Can anybody top that? Can you 8 half hours in 22 days for the whole 8 episode season? That was their shooting schedule. Can you? I'd love to hear your.
Did they do a lot of the silent scenes that she was talking about?
Well, I think I'm in the middle of a season right now, and coming from film and had only done film, this is my first show. It's brutal. It really is, and especially the ambition of the shows that we're doing. I think even on this stage, and at least in my experience, in 5 days, and you have what you have. It's harder on the actors. I have almost an 80-year-old actor, so that's also really, really tough and scheduling it. But we talk about schedules because you get through it, and it really is its own thing because you're creating this entire world. You talked about you sort of are making a movie in 10, 13 episodes, and you're thinking of it in those terms, and you get down to it, and you just have to be very smart about how you schedule and when you schedule, and looking at the strips and it all is about what can you lose, but still retain storytelling, and how much are you editing, and how much are you not going to, and everybody wants to pad a little bit, but. So it really is a conundrum. And you were talking about the improvisation. I think to have that time is amazing, because I know for us that would be tough. In our world, but that is a feat to do that much.
So you shot over 5 days, and then did you have a fair amount of time for post? You were pretty much all in the can before you went on the air, or were you? We
were last year. This year I think we'll be more. We'll be releasing, but I think that. It depends. We shoot 5 days per episode, but we're contiguous. And there's shows that I hear that every once in a while we'll take a break. Like mid-season, we'll have a hiatus of a week to catch up, and we don't get that. We shoot it like a movie 10 weeks straight. So every situation is different, and but it's a ride.
Sarah, what was your schedule for I Live Dick?
Well, I think it sounds a little more sane than yours. No, we had the regular writer's room time, and then we shot for 10 weeks, and then we went into post for 10 weeks. So it was all divided, and we block shot most episodes.
And you did 10?
No, we shot 8. But we really tried to, for the actor's sake, and thinking about it as kind of a, 4-hour movie, which is how we envisioned the season, we did try to shoot it in chronology. So there were really very few exceptions that we kind of went out of order. So, and that was we're a bit method, so we wanted to do that. And then we flew back to Marfa at the end, and we ransacked the town for 10 days and got, you know, all the exteriors and all the B-roll and did all that. And so that was the craziest part of the season, was the last push when we were picking up everything outside. And but then also we decided that we really wanted the ambiance. I know this sounds really dippy, but we just wanted the feeling of Marfa. And because it was, we thought of it as a film, we wanted to shoot in Marfa. And if that meant having to shoot interiors and exteriors for the final episode, that's what we did. So, but then the post schedule was intense, but it was enough. And but it's delineated, so there was kind of a little tiny Christmas holiday in between.
Mm-hmm. That sounds good. Jonathan, what's your schedule on Baskets?
It's 4 days per episode. So, but we tried. We said we can't do it. So we went to about 4.35 days per episode. We shoot it completely out of order. You know, like a movie. Just like, okay, we're at episode 10, episode 3, back to back. So that's really a testament to the actors. You know, we just kind of huddle. Okay, remember you fell off the thing. You went there. You did. You know, so it's challenging, and I think the actors are. It's hard. They said we don't want to do that, but I said we have to. We can't. You know, so it's tight. It's tight, and you have to, as the director, you have to be like. I pride myself on doing some assistant director work on set, which is really annoying to an assistant director, but because you just got to get all the stuff like as fast as you can. We're improvising a lot because, like you said, when you have certain people, you got to do it. Otherwise, you're wasting their talent. So it's a mad dash. It is insane, and the writing period is very short too. It was 12 weeks, so just rewriting through the whole season too. Pulling up the scripts. Okay, I got to change this, get that out. You know, so it's a mad dash.
Do you do much in Bakersfield anymore?
0.
Prentice, what was your schedule?
For us, it was like last year we had 5 days and we weren't airing, so we had done all the episodes and we're cutting. And what we realized last year was so much of our show takes place in the actual neighborhood. Like, you know, we're in Inglewood, we're in South Central, we're in, you know, like LA, like in Leimert Park. We're in areas that aren't usually used to being filmed because that's part of our show. And so we're super location based. And the toughest thing on our show is we have these little small moments, right? There are like these little bitty moments of characters making these little bitty choices that on the page, they're like 1/8 of a page. So you're like, great, that's like a fucking 1/8 of a page. And that lighting setup takes 4 hours. It takes the same amount of time to like 1/8 of a page that it does to do a suit of sheen for 2.5 pages. It's the same time. And for us, it was, and this year's been even more intense because I'm literally have to go back to set tonight. We come on July 23rd. That wasn't a push for the show, a promo at all. But we're at like my kids haven't. Like last week I realized I had not seen my kids since Tuesday because I'm sound spotting over the weekend and sort of doing that. But this year we got 6 days, and it still doesn't seem like it's enough because for us we're trying to show. Like, I feel like, you know, you've seen a certain LA, and East and I were having been, you know, grown up in LA, you know, typically I think on shows, you usually see all the sexy LA, right? Beverly Hills, Malibu, the OC, whatever, all those things that you never, anytime you see like our neighborhoods, it gets lumped into like this Compton, or like you never see the pretty parts of like a lot of LA where like a lot of people live. And for us, it was like, how do we make those parts of LA, Inglewood, South Central, like Leimert Park, Baldwin Hills, be beautiful and amazing? And it's been such a testament to our director Melina Matsukis of like, but it takes time. It takes time to light those things. It takes time to shoot those things in cool ways and interesting ways. And how do you make that city become a character in those little towns and those little places become that? And so like very little work of our show is like done on stage. We're like on stage maybe a day and a half. We're on location like 4.5 days.
So much
So
location on that
it's
show,
just so it's just harder. It's just harder in general.
Which, as an Angelino by birth, it just grounded the show so much. I recognized a lot of the. Now, Mike, was it unusual for you to work on a Netflix schedule where you had everything lock, stock, and barrel in the can because you dropped on the same day?
Yes, that was. I mean, we knew we liked the show, but there was definitely, in a good way and a bad way, mostly in a good way, there was nobody like trying to like course correct or anything because the ratings, somebody likes this character, blah, blah, blah. You know,
Dial test went one way or the other.
yes, the worst thing in the world, always. And I would just say that our schedule, I mean, we're doing a play, so it's a totally different, having done single camera, I remember the stress of single camera is just sort of this unrelenting, constant, it's all coming at you, just you have to approve shit for this scene because you're doing that scene, and crossboarding, and like your mind is just, and it's 12 hours or 15 hours or, and then you get to the end and you collapse and have a lot of drinks and some drinks along the way. Whereas the multi-camera stress is like, it's like it comes in like waves because you just have that one take night. So you have the table read and you're like, oh my God, I hope it doesn't suck. Oh, it doesn't suck. Okay, good. Then you fix it, and then each rehearsal, you keep having to show your work. And as a perfectionist, the great thing about single camera is you can at least like edit, get it all ready, and then here it is. And for us, we have tape night, and it's like, I hope you like it. Some of it's not figured out. We might, like, the camera rehearsal was a little wonky. Like, you just have to go. And we always figure it out. But it's, it reminds me of, broadcast news. It's that kind of, like, herky-jerky tension.
Was the basic rhythm of the schedule, though, similar to Raymond doing the multicam in terms
Yes.
of the number of days?
Yes, 5 days, table read, couple run-throughs, camera day, taping.
Gotcha. And Justin, as the lone representative of the 22, the endurance test, can you talk about your schedule?
Yeah. 22 is becoming a relic, and I hope it becomes a full relic real soon.
If you had your druthers, you would do fewer episodes.
I mean, I think there's certainly value towards what I think, Prentice, you were talking about. Like, when you're 22, you're just a part of the schedule all the time, and I think that's a great way for people to identify with the show. And there's something really nice about that consistency that it's always on. So I think there's definitely value from that. But especially when you talk about serialized shows and wanting to kind of tell a finite story. I don't know how many of the shows of you guys in non-network, if you write the season and then you start shooting, or if there's any overlap. But I know, for us, that would be impossible. So
you're on the train.
Yeah, you're just always going. So you have 8 or 9 weeks at the beginning of the season. That's your pre-production to just get as far ahead as possible before the beast starts chasing you. And you want to get we get something like 8 story ideas ready, something like 5 scripts. And then you're just going, and then, I worked it out once, and I think at any given time in the middle of production, and we shoot 5 days, we usually do 3 in a row and have a week off, which is a pretty luxurious schedule by current standards. And by week off, I mean a production hiatus. It's a time for the writers to be able to catch up, just to get there. Yeah. So really, at any given time, you've got 8 or 9 episodes at some point that you're thinking of, between like the story or the outline or the script or production, or the rewrite or production or post or mix. And, you'll be going, and especially with anything serialized, you'll get to episode 12 and you'll think like, wow, I just realized the best thing. I wish we could is there any way to go back and change the order and do tweaking, or no, we just have to like keep going with what we've set up. So it's like being an architect and starting to build the building when you just have like a very, basic notion, and just hoping it all doesn't fall down at the end, I guess.
Well, this is definitely a sort of a big game venture, doing any television show. Speaking of schedules, I wish we had more time, but we are out. I so appreciate you all coming and sharing your thoughts and your information.